Okay. Well, good. Well, we are officially live, folks, and want to get started. And I want to officially, on behalf of the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, I want to welcome everyone for being on this call tonight. All of our amazing couples this evening, and I represent the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation. We're hosting this, and our mission is to, what's our mission? Our mission is to partner with the fire service and burn care community to provide safety and prevention education, support medical facilities, and assist burn survivors in their journey of recovery. And that mission statement for us, we really could put the last part in bold type. Assist burn survivors in their journey of recovery. And that's what brings us here tonight. And this is the 18th episode of GFBF Talks. And that's pretty amazing that we've gotten to 18. And actually, when we started this at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought the pandemic would be a couple of months and we'd be back to normal. We'd get one or two of these under our belt and we'd be back to normal, but that didn't happen. And now that the world is opening back up, we've gotten a pretty positive response from these sessions. And like we like to call it, virtual conversations. And the conversations doesn't require any planning or any prep, because it's a very informal conversation. And we just appreciate you guys being willing to be on here and being willing just to share a little bit of yourself in an open conversation about relationships, for burn survivors, and what that's like. What are some of the challenges and triumphs to being in a relationship having a different physical appearance. And for those of us who've been injured by a fire, we heal, but it definitely leaves its fingerprint on our bodies. And I think that it would be a very beneficial conversation just to talk about that. We're not on here just to talk about success stories and how great love is, but really want to talk about some of the challenges, because there are people out there who are listening in that, one, either don't believe they could ever be in a relationship because of their physical difference or their scars, or maybe have some doubts about their own self-worth. And just to get into a conversation this evening about that, we think it's tremendously beneficial. And we've got a couple of rock stars that have just logged on, which is Bob and Leslie Amar. How you guys doing?
Hi there.
We're good. How are you?
Nice to see everybody.
Yes. And I just did a quick introduction about the Burn Foundation and why we're here and what we're coming here together tonight. Which is hello, Barbara.
Is there any way to see everyone who's on the call, or do I just see me and you?
There's a setting you have to go to, gallery setting.
Never mind then. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
But you didn't want to just see me, Barbara?
I don't mind. I don't mind. I just didn't want to be selfish.
Okay, it can be a bit overwhelming, can it? But as I was saying in the intro, this is the time for us to come together and have a very informal conversation about relationships, which can be challenging in themselves, but having a physical difference, it creates some additional challenges. And I want us just to have an informal conversation about it. And I've got a few notes in. It's not going to be in any kind of order, but before we do that, I want to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves. And we'll start with Bob and Leslie. Yeah, let's just start with them.
Are we muted? Are we unmuted? I can't.
You're unmuted.
Okay. Well, hi everybody. My name is Bob. We know some of you people for sure. We're Bob and Les. We're out on the West Coast in Long Beach, California. We have been married a long time, but I robbed the cradle, so yeah. She's a baby, and I'm aging a lot these days. But we have a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to take up a lot of time. It's great to be with you folks. Thank you for inviting us, Dennis. And it's good to see you, dude.
Yes,
Been a long time.
yes, yes. Leslie, we got to get intros from both of you guys.
I'm Leslie. My Dennis, don't leave. Yeah, I'm secretly in love with Dennis, but now the secret's out. So anyway,
No secret.
Yes, no
it's okay.
secret.
Bob's cool with it, so it's okay. We've been legally married like 30,
38 years.
yeah, that's many years. And we raised 3 girls, and I'm Bob's caregiver and also a SOAR trained volunteer.
Okay, great, great. Scott and Barb.
My name's Scott Didman. Barbara and I have been married almost 20 years. And our relationship's so great. I'm in Texas and she's in Louisiana. So, you know, it's even better now. But I'll let her introduce herself.
I met Scott about 9 years after his injury. So I didn't experience any of the care for him at all, or haven't had to do any care for him. But it's been a wonderful experience being with him and meeting so many wonderful people. And like Bob, I robbed the cradle because Scott's 52 and I'm 71. So we're good.
That young stuff, they say it keeps you young.
And she lied. She does have some caregiving to do for me, but it's not because of my burn injury. It's just because I'm a kid. I'm a man.
Okay, that pretty much says it.
Yeah.
Laura and Chandler.
Hi, I'm Laura Boglin. We have been together for 6 years and married for about 1.5 years now. Yep. Your turn.
That. I'm Chandler. Yeah, married 2 years back in 2020. And yeah.
Okay. And it is so cool that we had an opportunity to be at that wedding. Laura,
yay.
yeah, Laura started coming to camp when she was an itty bitty 5-year-old camper and grew up, and now she's a counterpart and had the privilege of being invited to the wedding, which had a tornado come through, which is the first wedding I'd ever attended where there was a tornado involved. So they did it big. They did it big.
I'm gonna say, go big or go home.
Go
There
big
you
or
go.
go home. Yeah, yeah. Barry and Sue Kirby.
Well, I'm Barry, this is my wife Sue. We actually met way back in 1976. I was in middle school. She used to ride dirt bikes 2 doors down from my grandmother's house. And I told my brother, I said, one of these days I'm going to marry that girl.
Mhm.
And then after we both had relationships elsewhere, we got together in 1994, bringing 2 kids apiece from our previous relationships. And we've been together ever since. They're raised up now with, I think with last count as of this 2 months ago, we now have 8 grandchildren. And so we're getting on up there, but she robbed the cradle as well. She was a little bit older. We won't talk about ages, but yeah.
Hey, I'm fine being a deaf leopard. It's okay.
Now, some people on this call may not even know what you're talking about. But Sue Kirby.
Hi, it's good to meet all y'all. Yeah, everything Barry said is absolutely true. And our babies now are our dog, our cats, our goats, and our rabbits. So,
Wow.
yes, if anybody wants any of them, we'd really rather travel now that everything's getting back to normal somewhat. So if anybody wants any of our animals, we'd gladly travel if y'all take care of them.
that was a pretty nice plug. And I have to say that I can't let you get away, Barry, without acknowledging that Barry retired now, but was a career firefighter. So he was on the front lines.
Thank you.
Yes, and we have to acknowledge that you
Still
dedicated.
working, but just retired from the fire department.
Yes, yes. But I'd be remiss not acknowledging that. So thank you very much,
Thank
Barry.
you.
Thank you.
Yes. Michelle and Mo. I almost called, I consciously said I wasn't gonna call you Fluffy, Mo.
I answer to whatever, you know that.
I do know.
But,
You go ahead.
yep. Go.
So Mo and I have been together for 20 years this October. We met actually at World Burn. We've been married for 15 years. Like Scott and Barbara, I met Mo well after his initial injury, but have definitely experienced some caretaking with him, with issues with his skin and stuff post burn injury. Being a 30-year survivor, that comes with its own things. So, but yeah.
Hi, everybody. I am Mo Fluffy Maurice. I go by quite a few names. As Michelle said, we've been together for 20 some years. I have to say, she's helped me a lot in my, having to go in and out of the hospital still, and she's most definitely my voice when I can't voice what I need to my nurses and doctors. So, she's kind of that hammer for me.
Okay, okay, great. Well, it's great having everyone on here. And I want to start, well, before I even get into the questions, full disclosure, I'm not facilitating this conversation about relationships because I'm an expert in relationships. Let me say that first off. I am divorced, and I don't know how long you have to be divorced before you can start calling yourself single again. But I was married for 5 years, and it took a very, very long time to realize how my burn injury impacted my relationship. And it was because I've been able to be involved in the burn community with folks like you that I was able to look at myself a little bit differently and have some really hard, honest conversations with myself and really begin to understand how my experiences manifest itself. So I want to thank you guys for being that support for me, but I just wanted to be full disclosure that I'm not a relationships expert. I was married 5 years, and it was 5 years of living hell. But I take the blame. I take the blame for it because it's really difficult to love someone when you don't love yourself, or to allow someone to love you when you're not loving yourself. And I wasn't aware of that. So when I say living hell, it's not that I'm slandering my ex-wife. It's an indictment on me and the growth that I needed to do to be in that relationship. So I want to say that, but I do want to touch on something that Mo said, and this is for everyone. What's the difference between being a lover or a caregiver? What is the difference? I know Mo, you said some of you said you took care of your partner and that kind of thing, but what's the difference between a lover and a caregiver? Or is there a difference?
Well, if it's just the lover, after I have fun, I go home. You're on your own.
Okay. Okay.
And
That's what I've heard.
I think, there's kind of a line when you're a caregiver, the relationship is different than if you're a lover, because the caregiver sometimes, like I've spoke with couples and stuff where the husband was burned and they had young children, and it's almost like now the wife or the caregiver, instead of having 2 children, now they have 3 because they're taking care of their husband, as it's almost like they're a child, because early on, especially, you need lots of help. And then later on, I think you can have, even in the same relationship, you can be a caregiver hat, and then you can have your lover or significant other hat. it's too different. I don't know that I answered the question very well, but I think there is a difference.
Well, I want to pitch this to Leslie and Bob because you guys were together when the injury occurred.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. We
Yeah.
were. We were. I really like what, hold on, I can't remember names. What Mo said about his wife, Michelle, that she was the hammer when she needed to be. Because sometimes I feel like I really got to be especially in the beginning, I felt like I really had to be the hammer when necessary, which is kind of hard sometimes. But I think I was still like the lover when I needed to be. I think we switched. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, it was a very strange position to be in because we were married for 15 years when I got burned. So we were lovers for a long time.
Until we had kids.
And then all of a sudden she had to be my caregiver because, I was all of a sudden taken out of the picture as her lover for a while, for 6 weeks. I mean, I was in the hospital for 6 weeks in intensive care. And it was kind of brutal to our relationship, fractured our family.
That's true.
And she had to be my caregiver for, well, God.
I'm still your caregiver.
Mhm.
We were just at the doctor 2 years ago. Come on.
And we just saw a real well, what happened was I just had to have another surgery, another 2 surgeries, and at the same doctor from 22 years ago, I was having surgeries and she had to be my caregiver again. I had eyelid surgeries, and I was blind, and she had to be my caregiver again. And it just threw us back into that same.
It was right back to 1999 immediately.
There was really a vivid realization of that. It was awful. It was really terrible because, God, it was just brutal for us.
And so does eyelid shut. Like,
Yeah.
it was awful. I thought I was okay. I thought I was fine. We dealt with that stuff in 1999, but yeah, no.
So, and I often say it's harder on the caregivers than on the burn survivors, especially when it's happening. And we're a real strong example of that because, I got knocked out for 3 weeks and got lots of drugs for the next 3 weeks. And she had to go through it stone cold sober and watch me be tortured for a couple of years and be my caregiver, and that had to be terrible for her. I don't know how she did it. I know how I did it. I took drugs.
Right. And it's something interesting you said. Now, as a caregiver, what's it? Because caregiving is not just physically. In a relationship, you are a caregiver of sorts to each other emotionally. And I'm just wondering, with the caregivers on this call, does any of that resonate with you? Because you haven't been burned, but being in a relationship with someone who has, I would think it kind of deepens your empathy or your understanding of that suffering, if you will. And as a caregiver, and I see some people nodding their heads, and I'm just wondering, what's that like for people?
Well, if I can, I want to
yes,
tag on to when Sue and I first met. Shortly after that, I got burned while I was in high school, and we didn't get together until 1994. And the interim of that time period, her dad had gotten burned in a explosion. And so she was familiar with dealing with this type of situation before we ever got together. And as I discussed in our previous discussion and talk times, that I didn't feel like that there was any support groups back when I was going through my ordeal. Mm-hmm. And so the first year I came to camp was, we showed up on Saturday On Monday, her dad passed away.
Mm,
I left to go back for the funeral, and I came back on Thursday evening because she still had family there with her as her support group. But she understood where I was coming from and what I needed. And she's been my rock ever since.
Thank you.
mhm.
She kind of had an understanding of where, on the emotional side of things, the things that I haven't been able to deal with up until I started coming to camp.
Mhm, mhm. Did you feel slighted at all, Sue?
No, not really.
Mhm.
That's a short answer, right?
Yeah, I'm
I
not.
think there was a mutual understanding by the fact of her dad being a survivor. She knew where I was coming from, and she knew what I needed to process and to go through.
I know my
I
dad
still
would
have-
be so happy to have, if he wouldn't have known or knew what Barry has put into the burn camp as many years as he's been involved. And I'm equally as happy for my husband to participate, to carry that on, you know, through my dad and him. They're both very good men, and I'm just happy to have them, or to have Barry involved. That's good for him and his
Emotional
his
well-being.
emotional well-being. Yes, he
And
looks
it-
forward to it every year.
It's good for him, but is it good for you as well?
Yes, because then I get my alone time and I have time to take care of myself.
And she says, I always come back a better person when I come back.
Yes,
Mhm.
he's so sweet when he comes back and huggy.
Now, Dennis, Sue, I have a question. Do you think, since lots of times we say that the family is a burn survivor as well, since your dad, you know, you were already a burn survivor, you'd already experienced that. You think that really helped you understand Barry more? I think that
Yes.
was,
Yes, I absolutely do. I absolutely, because it can go from just a burn blister all the way to something very severe. And both my dad and Barry were both, my dad was very severe, but I guess Barry's moderately severe or something, his
I was
injuries.
minimal in comparison.
But I don't even know what the question was.
Well,
I think,
I feel like personally, the difference was her dad got burned later in life to where I did it as a young teenager.
Oh, yeah.
And the coping skills, her dad had been able to do things all of his life and now couldn't do them for himself. And
Yes.
it became a whole family dynamic to where I was still learning how to do for myself from the get-go. So,
And I kind of lost my mom during all that, because my mom then became my dad's full-time caregiver. My dad's face and his hands were burnt. He couldn't do anything with his hands at all. So it was pretty much, I would tend to help with things that she couldn't do. We just take up everybody's slack as a teamwork effect.
Mhm.
And yeah, I miss my mom because she was always having to help my dad. And my dad felt bad because he was not independent anymore. And he was a very independent man, a
Mhm.
very successful independent man. And he was depending on her, which I'm not so sure it helped their relationship. They got into it every now and then when he would get so frustrated because he couldn't help himself. But it's just a big family ordeal. It does involve everybody.
Yeah, and he needed that hammer sometime, like someone mentioned. And Michelle, you and Mo, because I know you were involved in the burn community when you met Mo. So does any of that resonate with you, or you want to add something to what Sue said, because you didn't come into it blind?
No, I definitely didn't come into it blind, because I am a nurse that I did work inpatient in a burn center with acutely burns people. And now I work outpatient and have, the patients that have been in the hospital and, burns that don't require hospitalization. So I definitely wasn't blind to the care involved and what like he went through. And I think that that sort of impacted me a little bit, excuse me, and has impacted our relationship because hearing like stories about like his family dynamic and what he went through with his family, because I knew stuff, it sort of bothered me the way that things were handled with his family. But to speak to your question about versus a lover versus a caregiver, so I see it very differently. Like I'm his spouse. I signed up for this. I love him. And like when he feels bad about like me having to like help him with wound care or dressing changes or going to the doctor or whatever, that's what I feel like that's part of my role as his spouse. And I always ask him, I'm like, if it were me and our role was reversed and I needed care and I needed help, would you do the same thing for me? And he's like, of course. And I'm like, okay, then that's why are we having this discussion? Because you would step up and do it for me if I needed it. So why do you not expect me, or why is it not okay for me to do the same for you? So that's just, I see it as, you're a lover and you're a caregiver in, whatever the situation needs.
But isn't it often, and I'm bouncing this to you, Mo, isn't it often, probably for all of us, isn't it easier to help than to receive help?
Absolutely.
Isn't it easier to be the helper?
Yeah. I will help any person. I'll give them the shirt off my back. And like that's where I'm happy. So, but when I get into, when it changes where I need to ask for help, I shut down. Like in my head, I don't want to be a burden. So I try to do any and everything by myself. That's with her, and that's even with my nurses and doctors when I'm in the hospital, which was literally a couple weeks ago. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So, it was hard for me to sit on my hands and let them take care of me and show me that they care. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And everybody was nodding their head on that one. How did you work through that? And Laura, specifically for you, because I've watched you grow up and I saw how independent you were as a camper and the independent woman that you grew into. And I just wonder, how does this resonate with you and Chandler?
What's the specific question?
having being in a relationship, I think, again, I'm not an expert, but I think you have to, it's a constant compromise, and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And how difficult is that for you, being the independent person that I know you to be? How difficult is that for you to allow Chandler? Even when I asked you about doing this session tonight, you spoke for you and him. And I said, well, you might need to talk to him first to see if he'd want to do it. So I'm just wondering, how difficult is that for you receiving help? And Chandler, how much of a fight is it for you being in a relationship with someone who's so extremely independent?
Oh yeah, I struggle with it constantly. And I mean, Chandler, after 6 years, he's picked up on cues. I'll start acting different. Definitely when like I'm going through a depressive episode, I don't tell anyone about it. And then Chandler just constantly keeps going, are you okay? Is something going on? And then finally, like, he gets on my nerves enough. I blow up and say, I'm going through an episode. And then, we talk through it. And then every time he's like, well, you got to tell me. I can't just pick it up. And then, I still don't do it. I'm trying, but yeah, it's rough. It's hard being vulnerable to him.
Yep. Patience is key with any relationship, but yeah.
How do you balance that, Chandler? I mean, you say patience is the key, but how do you balance that? That's for any of us. How do you balance that? What works for you?
For me, just I don't know. I've always been told that I'm the most patient person that people know. So I guess
It drives me up the wall.
so I guess that helps. Then just, knowing that she's going through something and then just trying to be there with her and do what I can to help her.
Mhm. Mhm.
Dennis, I think, and I say this, I was burned when I started this relationship. Really didn't have any relationships before being burned because I was 22, and I mean, I had a couple, but looking at it from a different standpoint, I think we could have people that had never been burned here, and we'd be having some of the same conversations.
Mhm.
I really think, as you said earlier, it takes a relationship takes work. It doesn't matter burned, not burned. We all bring luggage and stuff into a relationship, and you really have to work. You have to work together on communication and that kind of stuff to really get through a lot of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Early on, Barbara and I, we're still not the best communicators at times, but we somehow worked. We both grew up, I guess, in the relationship,
Mhm.
and it was just it was just by happen chance, I think, but we worked at it.
Mhm.
And I really think that's a lot of any relationship. I have a good friend who's a burn survivor, and him and I were talking one day about he went through a divorce, and he said, my ex-wife and I's problems, yes, they may have had some burn related to it, but really we had the same problems any other married couple has sometimes.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes we need to realize that our burn injury does have an effect with it, but really we need to realize too that if we wasn't burned, we might still be having some of these issues.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think it's key when you mentioned communication. I have a friend who was burned as a child and grew up with her burns and her scars. And the boyfriend she had in high school, they went to college, and when they got out of college, they got married, and they were married for 13 years and had 2 kids. And he left her. And she called me, and we were having a conversation. And, she told me, she said, I knew he was going to leave me because of my scars. Now, she had the scars when they met. She had the scars when they dated. She had the scars when they married. She had the scars when they had kids. But after 13 years, just what you said, Scott, apparently it had nothing to do with the scars because she already had it. But because that was the thing that she was most insecure about. And we tend to place the blame on things we're insecure about. So in her mind, the entire while she was married and dating, she thought he was going to leave her because of her scars. And it may sound irrational, but it was as real as she made it to be. So when you talk about communication, man, it is just so many different levels to that, whether you're burned or not. And we found that in these GFBF talks, in these sessions, there hasn't been a single session that the conversation was exclusive to burns, because relationships are hard. Relationships have challenges, even without the burn. But having said that, initial attraction, for those who were burned before you got into the relationship, what was the initial attraction? And just to be honest and speak to the elephant in the room, do the scars matter in a relationship? That's a question for anyone.
Barb, you want to tell them what you first noticed about me when we met?
No, it
As long as it's PG, bar. As long as it's PG, bar.
With that.
No. When I in person met Scott, I didn't know anything about his injury, and I don't even remember ever looking or anything. And we got in the hot tub, so I'm thinking he took his shirt off, and all of his back is grafted, and then some of his arms and stuff. But I never ever noticed it, and I can't tell you when the scars or anything came up in our relationship, and nothing ever discussed about it. I just met Scott and got to know him, and he was just Scott. I don't even know when I even first saw his scars.
You don't know how you felt about that or why it wasn't discussed?
Like I say, I don't even know when we discussed it, and there was no reason to discuss it. It was who he is. He was, big old 6'7" chunky little boy with gross clothes. And that's more important than a scar. What's a scar? It just never entered my mind. And once I can only imagine that once I did learn that he had scars, and after learning about his injury, it was still never an issue, except I just liked rubbing his back because it felt cool. But other than that, it played no part in any of our relationship.
And I want to be clear when I say to discuss it, not in the sense that it was an issue, but it is part of your partner's experience. It doesn't necessarily mean, if you're dating someone with a leg missing, not that it's an issue, but I would be a little curious, what the hell happened to your leg? I would be. And, there have been so many questions about when do you discuss it? When do you not discuss it? There's been a million questions and there's been a million different responses. None of them are wrong, but it's like, when do you discuss it or do you not discuss it? I was married for 5 years, never in that entire 5 years discussed with my wife how I felt about my burn. Wow. She knew how it happened, but not how I felt about it, which didn't give her license to let me know how she felt about it.
Right.
And like I say, when I met Scott, it's just asking questions for certain things is not who I am. Scott told me how the injury happened. He was healed and he was better, didn't need surgeries, didn't need anything. And it's not that we didn't not discuss it or to discuss it. And part of it, I believe, is just the way that Scott carried everything along. This is a part of who I am. This is what happened when I was in college. I was in the hospital, I got better, I went back to school, I did this, I did that. And it's no different than him having gray hair or being bald for us.
And her talking about my gross clothes, I had on these, the first time we met online and we talked back and forth, and I had on these ugly Coaches. This is in the late, this is 2000. I had these ugly coaching shorts on.
But you can wear whatever you want on those porn sites, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you wear. Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, I never brought up that I was burned when we talked, because like she said, it's just part of who I am. I'm 6'7". I've always been taller than real tall and stood out in a crowd. So I really think, and I do have a facial burn. I have, my arms are grafted or burned, but I think always standing out in a crowd, it didn't bother me like it does some people. And so that's why I didn't make a big deal about it. I'm sure I told her how tall I was and all that, but I really think, and we discussed it, but it was more what happened. And then as we got to know each other, it's like, ooh, will you rub lotion on my back and stuff like that. So, but I think, and she was a little bit more mature than other people that I had had been around. So, that I think changed, that was a little bit of it as well. And her saying that she doesn't ask questions. I went through
I said
the
about certain things. I said
the
about certain
Spanish
things.
Inquisition, but she did not question me about that. So,
I think part of it too, I was taught growing up that you don't look at somebody and judge anything or talk anything about what they look like. You get to know the person and their heart, and that's all that matters. So for me, that's just who he is.
Mhm.
So, Michelle and I met Michelle at a weird transition in my life. I met Michelle in 2002. My first world burn was in Grand Rapids in 2001. And that was the first time that I was experienced to other burn survivors.
Mhm.
So for 10 years, I thought I was the only burn. So I've always been in my head about how I look. And even though, she's in the medical field, it's been a struggle for me even still to share with her how I feel about myself. Because to be completely honest with all of you, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a pretty face. But I love this woman to death. And I'm trying through therapy and whatnot to start to love myself. But this is a long transition for me because like Michelle said earlier, my childhood after my burn was horrible. So I'm dealing with that PTSD and trusting and like it's a lot for me, and I know it's a lot for her. So I don't know. I guess yes, that conversation for me matters, but and I'm pretty sure the spouses that aren't burnt or will say, they don't see the scars. And I don't understand that because when I stand in the mirror, that's all I see.
It's funny because we were talking and he was like bringing up an issue that he had with like this scar here on his face. And we were on the phone and he was like, Michelle, it's the big scar on my face. What do you mean you don't see it? And I was like, Mo, it's just who you are. Like, it's not something I notice. Like, it's not something that is like super prominent to me. It's part of your face. It's part of the face I fell in love with. Like, I don't see it. And he's like, how do you not? It's like so big. It's right there. But I don't. It's just like, it's all part of who he is.
I'm not gonna lie. I met Bob, way before he got burned. So I got used to having, the pre-burn Bob. And I definitely noticed the scars and the pain and everything. But getting back to your original point, Dennis, was I think what really would have made a big difference for me was if we had caregiver support, because Bob had no support and I certainly had no support. And I think being able, like, if we could have all gotten together and if I could have talked to you guys about it, it would have just made everything so much different. It was like a deal breaker. And to answer your question now, though, obviously I saw it a lot when it first happened. It was traumatizing. But now I don't really see it at all.
But I'm with Mo. That's all I see when I
Yeah.
look in the mirror. Yep.
Really?
Yeah,
Even now?
absolutely. Yeah, even now. That's all and when we take pictures with the family, I always try it because the right side of my face is autographed. And I always try to be on the side so I can turn to the left.
I didn't know you
when
did that.
I do. I don't make a big deal about it, but maybe it's unconscious too, but I'm with you, Mo. I see it every time I look in the mirror. I'm always looking, I look at my eyes because, you know, they're different. I mean, it's like, it's all I see.
Don't see it now.
And you know, and this is so important right here, what we're discussing, because I've had the privilege of being involved in a lot of support groups, you know, helping facilitate those and, you know, attending different burn camps. And this is a conversation that happens without the spouses. You know, I mean, it really is, because, you know, you care about each other and this person loves me. They can't do anything about it, because I tell you, growing up, when I would hear that, I don't see your scars because I know you, or your scars don't matter. If people can't deal with it, that's not who you want to be with anyway, but they mattered to me.
Yeah.
It mattered to me what I saw in the mirror, because I'm right there with you, Mo, Bob. I would look in the mirror and just not like what I saw, but it took me 20 years to say out loud that I didn't like how I looked, that I didn't like the scars, because for 20 years, I was so afraid. For a while, I didn't know I could say it, but then when I realized I could, then I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, because if I said I didn't like how I looked, it was going to hurt someone's feelings, and their feelings were more important than mine. And it took me 20 years to say out loud that I didn't like it. And God, it was so painful hearing that, but it was also so cathartic as well, because I've been carrying it for so long. And I understand when people say, well, Dennis, you know, I don't even see your scars. It's like, well, hell, I do. I think when people say it, I think what they mean is they don't matter. But you can see it, and it doesn't mean it matters, because hell, you know, they're here. And I really want to pitch this to Chandler, because Laura was burned when you met. And Laura's pretty extensive burns. What are you, like 80%, Laura, somewhere around there?
Yeah, the only place I don't have scars is on my face. So.
So for you, Chandler, did you not see it, or how was that even approached?
So we met, we both worked at the same Arby's together, and I worked there before her. So I remember the first day I got to work with her, and the first thing I noticed was her, you know, back to what you said, Dennis, about her, how independent she is. And I noticed that, and just how she kind of just lit up the room with her personality. But also, I think you had just had arm surgery or something. You had a, what are they called? The sleeve? No, the sleeve.
Oh, my pressure garment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely noticed it at first, but to me, I just wanted to get to know her, because she seemed like, not even like romantically, just she seemed like a cool person to get to know.
And I will say, on the flip side of it, after, because at work I didn't care. So many people asked at work, it was ridiculous. And I think Chandler was probably one of the only people that didn't ask. But after we started dating, it was like every date I'll sit there, it's like, okay, when is he gonna ask? What is he gonna ask that it happened? And I remember finally we were just driving down the road and we passed the house that burned. I'm like, hey, look, I burnt that house down one time. And then finally he asked. He finally was like, oh, so what did happen? And it was just something that just kept nagging at me each date we had. And then like, as soon as he asked, I went, finally, you said something. And then, you know, we had the conversation of exactly what happened. And then just from there, it was like a weight on me. And Chandler, you know, didn't even have an inkling that I wanted him to ask me and just, you know, get the elephant out of the room, you know? So it was just one of those things.
Now, you wanted him to ask you, but why were you waiting for him to ask? Why didn't you volunteer it?
Well, that's just awkward to say, hey, while we're dating, I'm burned.
Do you not think it could have been potentially awkward for him to say, hey, what happened?
Well, see, Chandler's an awkward person. So bringing up something that's serious to him was just, I don't know. It was weird to me at the time. Still kind of weird to me now, but
Mhm, mhm. And sometimes it takes so
Scott,
much, because there's some really good friends I have, and she's a burn survivor. And her husband, he shared when they started dating and they became intimate, he would always make love to her with the lights on. And his routine was he would kiss every scar on her body with the lights on as a part of their making love. And she would share how difficult that was for her. But he wanted her to know that I love you and I love everything about you. But for her, she said she really struggled. And she said it took several years for her to even begin to be a little bit comfortable with that. So when you talk about communication, man, it goes both ways. You know, I want you to understand me while I'm hiding stuff from you. And you want me to understand you while you're supporting me, even if I don't ask or need support. You know, it's just that give and take. And it's an awkward balance. It's a really awkward balance. And, you know, again, I go back to saying I'm divorced, you know, and my divorce had a lot to do with my own baggage I brought into it.
But with that situation, isn't that more of him doing what made him feel better instead of what made her feel good? Yeah, if I'm not cool with that, buddy, you got to turn the lights off and listen to me.
Okay, but now if you're not cool with it, if you're not okay with your scars, do you not let me be okay with them?
No, that's up to me. That's not up to you.
So if you're not okay with your scars, then I can't be okay with them.
You can be okay with them, but you don't have to put them on display while I'm naked with the lights on.
Well, and I don't, you know, that's a debate that can rage on. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it was two people who were trying to stumble their way through it, you know, trying to figure it out. Like the way you looked at Bob a little while ago when he said that he has an issue with how he looks. I know how loving you guys are. I know how close you are.
I was just shocked because he never talks about it. So I was very surprised.
Which really speaks to the importance of this subject matter tonight, because it is our desire that someone is listening to this and something is resonating with them. Either someone who does not think they can be in a relationship because of their scars, or someone who thinks they know it all about their spouse. And going back to Scott's point, whether this was a group of burn survivors or not, the conversation would be identical. It would be, you know, identical. And they say love conquers all. It may conquer all, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's easy. And I cannot believe we blew through this hour so fast, because I think listening to this conversation, and it was just beginning to get juicy, for lack of a better way, because I've got tons of questions that I want to spit at you guys, and this probably would have been better served being a 2-hour session. It really would. But we schedule it for an hour because that's just about the limits of people's attention span. But because we schedule it for an hour, we want to be respectful of people's time, and we try really hard to keep it at an hour, and we're at 55 minutes already. And what I'd like to do is, one, I want to do a disclaimer to let people know that if something here has resonated with you, if someone feels they need to talk to someone, that's for anyone who's out in the social media world listening. We really encourage you. If you think you may need to speak to someone, we encourage you to do that. And if you log on to the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation website, we have some resources where people can log into and just talk to somebody, because as simple as talking appears, it is one of the most difficult things for human beings to do, having honest conversation. And I just appreciate you guys being so open and candid and honest. But I want to take this last 5 minutes to give each couple an opportunity to share something you may have wanted to share, or share some wisdom, not advice, but some wisdom you like to share with the world as we close this out. And we'll start with Mo and Michelle. I gotta call you Fluffy though. We'll start with Fluffy and Michelle. And there's a whole story behind Fluffy at the burn camp we'd attend, and the kids gave him that
This
name.
one?
Yes, Camp Susquehanna. But yeah, you guys share something you like to leave folks with, some wisdom. We'll call it wisdom. We'll take that leap. Or something that worked for you, something that you guys have learned together.
I think for me, allowing Michelle to love me.
That's it.
That's it for me, hands down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would say, just like what's been brought up a couple of times already, communication is key. You know, and like you said, marriage is hard work and it's not easy, and love is hard work and it's not easy. You know, being willing to work with your partner, and you know, we've done therapy together to improve things between us, and we learned that we don't communicate well. And we assume things about the other person in the way that we've communicated, but we're not getting the same message across. So being willing to work with your partner and learning how to communicate together so that you're not both assuming things is important too.
Great. Sue and Barry, what words of wisdom do you want to leave our folks with?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about whether you see the scars or don't see the scars in certain people. But I have found along the way that you look for the uniqueness in people. Whether the scar is a part of that or not, there's a part of them that makes them who they are, which is part of your attraction to one another. And because we all have flaws, some of them are more visible than others, and some people carry it around a little better than others. But everyone's unique, and you got to look for that in each other.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Sue, what do you got for us?
I agree with them. 100%. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, we'll
I
go
find
with
that
that.
a lot now, you know, because as I said, retired from the fire department. I'm now working in the health field, working around a lot of psychiatric patients and stuff. And everyone that comes through has different triggers. Their scars are not visible, but they carry emotional scars. And you've got to find that one piece that makes people tick, that one thing you can work with. And we work at it daily when I'm around, when I'm not at work. But, you know, we, as I say, each year is a growing experience. Every time I come back from camp, every time we do a new adventure together, it's just a growing bond that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be true in any relationship, scars or no scars.
Mm-hmm. Ditto, right? So, Laura Chandler.
I think it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of give or take. A lot more give from Chandler that I have to take. But yeah, it's the realization that we both come from completely different walks in life, and we have to give in to that a little bit. And with the communication of it, you know, he doesn't realize that I have a lot of nerve damage and some things just can't happen. And he realizes that, and we, you know, go a different route. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chandler.
I guess going back to the patience thing, you know, no matter who the couple is, just, you know, patience with understanding them, and just, you know, it's a whole another person that you're getting to know and, you know, potentially end up living with. And that's just a lot of change, and being patient, you know, with yourself and with them, and just, you know, coming together as one takes time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Scott, Barb.
Go ahead, my love.
Learning to listen with your brain in the listening mode, and learning to ask that person or say, because we come from different backgrounds, I don't know what you meant, but this is what I heard. Is that what you meant? And listening, truly listening to what they're saying, but not not from the point of where I come from.
And, you know, I think we really need to, you need to pick your battles. I had a gentleman one day tell us they'd been married over 50 years. We were at a hotel and we got to talking, and he said, you know, you really need to think, next week, is this going to matter? And I thought, man, that is some great advice, because sometimes there's big blowups over nothing. So pick your battles. And as Barbara said, listen with your heart and your head and not with your emotions.
Okay. Bob and Leslie, bring us home. Bring us home.
No pressure. No pressure. Hey, after you, Bobby Socks.
Well, something that we touched on that really resonated with me, you said that it's hard to realize when you have a caregiver that you need help, you know, and it's hard to accept that you need that help and ask for that help and then accept it. So that's a very difficult thing. Nobody really wants to be the person that accepts help from a caregiver, and tough thing to do. And also, I may have to be a caregiver pretty soon here. And so I hope I can be as caring of a caregiver as Leslie has been for me.
I'm going to crack the whip on you. Remember what I did for you? No, I'm not going to do that. I just think it's awesome. What everybody said, I mean, it's so true. Everybody had super good points. And we should write a book, because then everybody would have a happy marriage if they just listened to us. That's what I think.
Okay. Well, I just, wow. Thank you all. This has been a good conversation, and I just admire you guys for being together. And I'm not saying a storybook romance or anything, but just being together. And that's not easy. And I truly appreciate it. And I reflect back, and this has caused me to think a lot about my marriage. And it's just living with someone, I wasn't able to hide. You know, I could hide out in the world behind my smile and the things that I did, but to go home and close the door and just be vulnerable, now that I was living with someone, I couldn't do that. And it forced me to be with someone who was trying really hard to love me. And I wasn't able to accept it because I didn't love myself at the time. And it was hard looking at that. And it ended up in divorce. And had we had other people that we could have had a conversation with, maybe it would have turned out differently, you know. And it took me over 10 years after the divorce to kind of look at, and thankful to the burn community, I was able to look at some things. And I called her to apologize 10 years later, and didn't know.
Are you guys friends now?
I didn't know, Leslie, whether she would accept it or not. And I remember calling her on New Year's Eve. I said, I can't let this year go out without apologizing. And I called her New Year's Eve, and I was very afraid to do it, but I did it. And she thought I was making a booty call. You know, New Year's Eve, it's like, no, that's not happening. But as soon as I opened my mouth to apologize, I just broke down and started crying. And we had a 2-hour conversation, just a very open and honest conversation that we never had while we were married. And we hung up the phone, and I didn't know if it made a difference to her or not, but I know I needed to apologize. And when I would see her occasionally, she would introduce me as her ex, because when you get divorced, you don't have a name anymore or identity. But I remember a couple of months later, I ran into her, and she was with some people, and she introduced me. She said, hey, I want you guys to meet my good friend Dennis, and we used to be married. And that resonated with me. Say, wow, it did make a difference. And it's a difficult thing being with someone, but it's a difficult thing looking at who we are. So I say that to let you guys know how much I truly appreciate it. And I hope that this resonated with someone out there the way it has me tonight. So on behalf of the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, we extend our very heartfelt thank you, because it's because of people like you willing to put yourself out there that we can do that thing that we do and assist burn survivors in their journey of recovery. So with that, we went about 4 minutes over our 1 hour time, but I think we'll be forgiven for it. But I just, again, thank you guys so very much from the bottom of my heart, not as the director of the foundation, but as a burn survivor who's still on his journey and needs you each in my life very, very much. And I appreciate you and love you. And you guys have a good evening. And we just appreciate you. All right.
Thank
See
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
love y'all.
Thank you.
Nice
Nice
to meet
hanging out with you folks.
Night, night.
Night.
Or good evening for those on
It's
the West
only
Coast.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, I was gonna say good evening for those
Oh,
on the West
nice.
Coast. Yeah.